passed a unanimous consent motion today to again censure Mr. Hillier for his behavior.
I've recently come into possession of a video that I want you to watch. The video is from Friday the 18th in Ottawa. It is a video from TikTok of somebody videotaping a TVA, what appears to be a TVA broadcast, news broadcast of the same day. We can no longer find that video on the TVA website, and we can no longer see the video on TikTok. It has been scrubbed. But we do have it in our possession. I'd like you to look at it now. It shows what appears to be a severely injured or lifeless individual being dragged by two police officers outside of a swarm of police and protesters in Ottawa. Please take a look at this closely. One is clearly police. It appears the other one is also a police officer who are dragging this body from the crowd. We don't know who this person is. We don't know the extent of the injuries, if any. And the police have been silent on this, as well as the original video being scrubbed off TikTok and the news broadcast from TVA being scrubbed as well. I think the Canadian people deserve answers, truthful answers, accountable and open and transparent answers of what actually transpired in Ottawa during the Emergency Act. We know that our Prime Minister and our Chief of Police, the Mayor of Ottawa, and the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, have all described this in very, very reprehensible terms of what this protest actually was. I was there for nearly 3 weeks. In my entire time in Ottawa, I never once saw protesters engaged in aggressive, let alone violent behavior. Indeed, I would describe my time in Ottawa as a very festive, a very friendly, a very family-oriented protest about public policy. The people there were demonstrating that they disagreed with the current policies of our federal and provincial governments, and they were protesting for a return to normal. At no time was Parliament Hill occupied. At no time were anybody threatened with violence that I saw. The police still have not provided any evidence of this armed insurrection that they suggest was underway. There has been no display of firearms or body armor or anything else attributed to the protest, to the Freedom Convoy. At no time has the Prime Minister provided a shred of evidence that this was anything other than a peaceful protest by law-abiding, freedom-loving Canadians. So take a look at this video. I'm going to send it to the Attorney General, to the Solicitor General, to the SIU, and I want them to explain to the people of Canada what happened to this person who was dragged out of the crowd and never heard or seen from again, let alone explained. We know that our government has taken great latitude to misrepresent the protest in Ottawa. They have created a false and deceptive narrative. It is time for all Canadians to stop listening to the narratives and start viewing the facts. if there are facts that would warrant this, then it is imperative and an obligation of our government to reveal what those facts are. In the absence, then we must go with the facts that we do know. The facts that it was a very peaceful, festive protest, including bouncy castles, including road hockey games, including pancake breakfasts, including speeches on stages, and no violence. We are in a dark period of time. If our governments are giving the full sway to deceive Canadian people, to misrepresent lies, and what appears possibly to be engaged in a cover-up of evidence. What happened to this man? What is the extent of their injuries? Who is it? It's time for Justin Trudeau, Doug Ford, Jim Watson, and the Ottawa Police Chief Steve Bell to come clean and let us know what the facts and the truth are and how many people were seriously injured by the excessive use of force by the Ottawa Police and other police services under their command. Please share this video far and wide. All Canada needs answers to what happened in Ottawa on February 18th, 19th, and the 20th.
One of the ways that Mussolini defined fascism, which I think is quite interesting, is the integration of corporation and state. Okay, so let's talk about the media, the legacy media in Canada. $595 million salary subsidy in the last 4 years, $1.2 billion annually for the CBC, which has also been recommended to the CBC that they decrease rather than increase their reliance on private advertising. $60 million pandemic-specific emergency support fund, $10 million special measures for journalism top-up for 2021 and 22, and then the recent request for by the Toronto Star, and I hope I get this right, which is probably the loudest rag in the country beating the Trudeau drum, for $60 million, describing a $30 million annual shortfall in their operating budget. And so, here's the thing I think that Canadians are faced with at the moment that's so awful. It's related to this press-government collusion issue. The typical Canadian is someone who's believed for years in the reality of peace, order, and good government, right? Our constitutional principle, and that our fundamental institutions were essentially reliable: government, education, media. Let's say you could count on them to at least try to tell the truth under most circumstances. And so Trudeau now is facing them with a very difficult choice, which is you either believe that all of those institutions have become corrupt and unreliable in a profound and frightening way, and that now includes the banks, or you can believe that there's a handful of protesters who have far-right ties and can be justly demonized. And I suspect for most Canadians, for many Canadians, it's easier to believe the latter, especially when that's what the Prime Minister and his cronies are saying, than the former, even though, unfortunately, and I say this as someone with a fair bit of respect for fundamental institutions and wish that they would operate properly, unfortunately, the former has proved itself, perhaps in the last 2 weeks, to be far more true than even the most cautious of us and worried of us might have predicted even a month ago.
The coronavirus pandemic has no parallel in modern history. It is our defining moment.
People assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
We now welcome His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China.
Major economies should see the world as one community and coordinate the objectives, intensity, and pace of fiscal and monetary policies.
We have to redefine our social contract.
To help design the systems and institutions that the world needs to really cooperate, we have to incorporate much more expertise and knowledge into our global decision-making. We have to use the force of social networking as an empowerment tool. When I defined in a book the so-called stakeholder theory, our premise is that business ultimately has to serve not only shareholders but all stakeholders, which means business must serve society at large, is to reconstruct the global economy. What the world needs today is integration and cooperation.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.